issue that we have to deal here is one verse is chapter 2, verse 8. So let's look at 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 8. Can anyone read? 1 Peter.
And a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. They stumble being disobedient to the word, or which they also were appointed.
Yes. It says a stone that causes men to stumble and a rock that makes them fall. Then there is an explanation. They stumble because they disobey the message, which is also what they were destined for, right? A predestination, predestined to be a stumbling rock, right? A stumbling rock. So this verse, along with one more verse, okay, can you read this verse as well? Romans 9:22. Romans 9:22.
For I could wish that I myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my countrymen, according to the flesh.
Wait. Are you reading 9:22?
I read 9:2.
No, 22, sorry.
What if God, wanting to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction?
All right, so did you see that word? Vessels of wrath, prepared for destruction. So it looks like God prepared these unbelievers as vessels of wrath, and it is God prepared already beforehand, right? So looking at these two verses, chapter 2, verse 8 and 9, verse 22, this is the key text in debate over double predestination. What is double predestination? Double predestination is, yes, God predestined some people for salvation. And God also predestined some people for distraction or hell. So double predestination. So this is the question that needs to be addressed here, right? Let us look at. What does Peter mean when he refers to unbelievers appointed to stumbling or appointed to rejecting Christ? Suffering its consequences. What does Paul or Peter mean here? Now, the solution. There are 4 views on double predestination, right? Predestination, 4 views interpreting this verse. First is this: Peter is referring to national Israel, right? So who is this people, the vessels of God's wrath? Vessels of, here it says, stumbling rock in Peter. It says, because of the rejection and the crucifixion of Messiah, God temporarily judged national Israel and has turned to Gentiles in order to establish his church. As such, this verse is addressing national Israel, not individuals. It is national Israel that has been appointed to this judgment as part of God's plan of redemption. It is similar to Romans 9, where Paul cites Psalm 118 and refers to national Israel. And same is true with the Acts 4:11, where Peter cites Psalm 118, verse 22, and it addressed Jewish leaders. So basically, who is the vessels of wrath? It's not talking about all unbelievers. It's simply talking about Jewish nation. They are the vessels of God's wrath. Now, the problem with this interpretation is that Peter does not appear to be addressing specifically national Israel in this context. That is a problem. Because we look at, he says, those in view are not the builders mentioned in 2:7. And reference, but here in chapter 2, verse 7, it clearly says those who disbelieve, a reference to those who disbelieve the gospel, who do not believe the gospel in Peter. So it may not be national Israel, Israel as a nation, rather generally everyone. So that's the first view. Referring to national Israel may not be. Second view, Peter is saying that consequences are appointed, not individuals. God did not appoint individuals for hell or for punishment. Their consequences are appointed, predetermined. Hebert and Job, those are some of the commentators who take up that position. Peter's statement involves simple cause and effect relationship. They say it is the judgment that has been appointed, not individuals to this judgment. See, all who disbelieve the gospel has to suffer judgment that God has appointed as just consequences of their unbelief. So, God prepared the vessels of wrath. They take, it is the consequences are appointed, not the individuals. But what is the problem? Problem in this interpretation is the subject of the verb appointed. What appointed? It is not doom. As if Peter was saying, this doom has been appointed. No. Clearly says, the subject of the verb is appointed is the antecedent reference to those who stumble. Individuals are prepared for destruction, right? Individuals are prepared. So that means this is not really helping us in any way to say that consequences are appointed. It's clearly this is some individuals, right? So that is a third view, second view. So I got a problem. Now let's look at third view. Robert Raymond and John Gill, they all explain. They say Peter is affirming the reprobation of the non-elect, right? Affirms. In John Gill and Robert Raymond, they're good theologians, but they say, yes, when God says they are destined for disobedience and destruction, God simply affirms, right, their reprobate state, that unbelieving state. Peter is affirming God's eternal decree of election has an equal and opposite decree of reprobation. So, yeah, Robert Raymond explained that it is kind of double predestination or double election, double election. Double election. That is, some people are elected to be saved. Some people are elected to go to hell. God actively elected, actively did that. In other words, Peter is teaching double election in which God actively secures judgment of the non-elect in the same way he secures the salvation of the elect. So that is what Robert Raymond on this explained. A lot of Reformed theologians, I think some of them see this way. The problem with this interpretation is that double election would appear to make God responsible for the sinful responses of non-elect, and that lead to their condemnation and judgment. It appears to make God responsible. If the elect are secured for salvation solely on the basis of God's saving activity, then it could be said Non-elect are secured for judgment solely on the basis of God's condemning activity. So people are secured for judgment, ready to go to hell, because God secured that way. God condemned them in that way so that they will only go to hell. Right? So God actively participated. This is the third view and their problem, right? It appears to make God responsible, and God actively working to send people to heaven. Now, there is a maybe little moderate view, which I think is best, that is known as Peter is teaching preterition of the non-elect. Wayne Grudem and Thomas Schreiner look at that way, and I think that is maybe a little more better to look. What is that? Preterition of the non-elect. In God's decree to elect some to salvation, there is the corollary of his actively or willfully passing over the non-elect. For example, if there are 10 bad apples, and these 10 bad apples are rotten, and God maybe choose actively 3 for salvation for good use. There is a corollary of his actively willfully passing over the non-elect, right? So what he does, he willfully passed them this maybe 7 other bad apple. God just passes them by and let them suffer judgment as just consequences of their unbelief and sin. So what is that? When God actively chooses 3, that means God willfully pass them over and let God says, the rest of you be decayed and go to the mud. So the idea here is that, in other words, God intercedes on behalf of them, elect to secure them for salvation. He simply wills to pass over the non-elect, leaving them to suffer the consequences of their unbelief and sin. And God leaves them. Now, what is the problem with this view? The problem with this fourth view is that it appears to be in conflict with the other key text, Romans 9:22, we read already, where Paul says that God has not only prepared for glory vessels of mercy, but also prepared for destruction vessels of wrath. So God prepared. So the word prepared, is a little bit not simply passes by. So Paul's use of balanced phrases when addressing the elect and the non-elect seems to suggest some level of equivalency in God's activity toward both. Right? If they prepare, that word is used for salvation and for destruction, then maybe that it's kind of balanced word. So that passage is the difficult passage to explain for the fourth view. So what is the conclusion? Yes, I think fourth view has to be preferred. There's no double predestination. All that Romans 9:22 and 23 teaches or establishes is that God unilaterally prepared or determined the destiny of both the vessels of mercy and vessels of wrath. God prepared, right? The destiny, the end of these two groups, vessels of mercy and vessels of wrath. God prepared them both. In other words, The equivalency in the passage is in God sovereignly determining the destiny of the elect and the non-elect alike, right? The destiny is equally determined. But what this passage doesn't say is that God's method in bringing about the salvation of the elect and judgment of the non-elect is identical. It doesn't say bringing people to salvation and judgment is not the same way. For example, earlier in Romans chapter 9, Paul discusses God's choosing Jacob rather than Esau for salvation. God chose Jacob for salvation. Expression Jacob I have loved refers to God's placing his electing love on Jacob in the eternity past. Right? God placed his electing love on Jacob. Now the phrase Esau I have hated. Look at that one. That is interesting word. How did God hate Esau? Now, God looked at Esau, you are so bad, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to destroy, I'm going to do that, this, I know. It simply means God did not place his electing love on Esau in the eternity past. God only placed his electing love in the eternity past upon Jacob alone, not Esau. So the word hate is not active in a sense, active shown or demonstration of hatredness. No. To restate the point, text describes only one as chosen or elected. The other is described in terms of equivalent to his not being chosen or elected. So hated means God did not choose. In short, there is no text that expressly speaks of double election, as the third view argues. Yes, the destiny is made sure, but how God brought about that destiny is not explained in Romans 9 as well. Often, and this is the passage that we looked at already in the Pentateuch, hardening of Pharaoh's heart. Some people raise issue. Do this argue for a level of equivalency in God's action toward non-elect in provoking them to sin? When Bible said God hardened the heart of Pharaoh, is that God provoked Pharaoh to sin? Absolutely no. God's hardening the heart, whether of Pharaoh or someone else, is his withdrawing of God's common grace. God withdraws a little bit, they are more hardened. Withdrawing more of common grace, more hardened. Allowing the individual's depravity greater freedom of expression. So in each case, sinful choices of those whose hearts are hardened are still theirs and theirs alone. God doesn't do anything. God doesn't have to force anyone to choose sinful things. God is not culpable for the sinful choices of the heart or hardened heart. So, God just, if God allows them to continue in their depravity, every human being can be the worst wicked man ever possibly be. So God doesn't have to do that. God always does what? He's restrained the sin by common grace. So finally here, still others argue text of God sending evil spirit on someone. Yeah, Does this text argue for level of equivalency in God's activity toward non-elect provoking sin? It must be granted that these verses come to the closest to teaching a level of equivalency in God's action toward the non-elect, parallel to his action securing the elect salvation. All right. So, yes, did God send an evil spirit? He did send. However, assuming the worst scenario, God sent demonic spirit to provoke sin. The sinful choices these individuals make still involve exercise of their own volition. Any human being, when they sin, there may be many causes for it, but in the end, and for example, some people say, my circumstances are the cause, that is the cause, this is the cause, he is the cause, she is the cause. But in the end, everyone does what they do by their own volition, right? So these have compatibilistic freedom, right? We say freedom to do more wrong and take pleasure in their sinful choices, right? They do. Again, God is not culpable for the sinful choices of even those indwelt by a demonic spirit, presumably sent by God. God is not. So I say here, salvation of the elect is monergistic. What is monergistic? It is a work of God alone, single person's work, God's work. But condemnation of the non-elect is not monergistic. It is synergistic. God passed over the non-elect, allowing them to suffer the consequences of their sinful choice. So the moment God secured the destiny of the elect, it is equal that God also secured the destiny of the non-elect. So that is right. When God prepared the destiny of the elect, it is equal. God also prepared the destiny of the non-elect. But how God prepared the destiny of the elect and how God prepared the destiny of the non-elect is different. Among the non-elect, all God has to do is to allow them to continue in their sin. Whereas in the destiny of the elect, there are a lot of things God has done it to save, including sending Jesus Christ, including giving the faith, including repentance and a lot of things. So, yes, so that's the way I see this verse. All right. So, friends, this is a problematic passage, and maybe you can read one more time the discussion. If you have not clearly understood, please read one more time. That would help you in understanding of the issue of double predestination. Yeah, as far as the end is concerned, yes, God has determined, but the means, not God actively did not secure the mean, because God doesn't have to force anyone to sin. God doesn't have to provoke anyone to sin. Just allow the humanity in their sin. They will do all what God has done is restrain the sin by the common grace. And when God takes away a little bit of common grace, people do more sin. They harden their heart more and more. That's the way it functions. And therefore, God is not culpable of evil or sin.